It is my pleasure to present to you Phil Tuning. He is the Manager of Global Data Management and Governance for John Deere Financial.
Well, good morning. You know, I told Nathan that I would get the group back together so I could have more than 5 minutes, but he took that away from me. What I will tell you is we're very pleased to be here. One of the things that I was thinking about this morning as we listened to all the speakers, and I try to think about things in a model. And what I heard this morning was pretty amazing. And so I have 3 words to describe what each of our speakers before me, had. One was passion. How many of you saw the passion that each of the speakers had? They also took action, and they had strong commitment. And so I kind of put it into an acronym, PAC, passion, action, commitment. And that's what each person had that talked this morning. Very impressive, and I was stealing ideas from many of them as they talked as well. Now, I did get a chance, and you know, I will introduce our speakers later, but I did get a chance to chat with them a little bit beforehand. And I think one of the speakers told me to embellish as I introduced Heather. I said I would absolutely do that. But before we do that, I want to talk about a little bit about John Deere. You know, John Deere is very pleased to be a part of the greater Des Moines community. And as I was thinking about today and what I wanted to talk about, I went out to our citizenship site, and one of the things that we talk about very prominently is John Deere is a power for good. And we believe as we participate in the community, we do deliver the good of helping our communities grow. And so we're particularly proud to be members of the Greater Des Moines Partnership, and we're especially honored to be one of the hosts of this 4th annual Executive Forum on Diversity and Inclusion. As many of you know, John Deere is a global company. We have 3 operations in the Des Moines area, and we got representatives from, I think, all 3 locations. So John Deere Des Moines Works, which is in Ankeny, our Intelligent Solutions Group, which is in Urbandale, and the worldwide headquarters for John Deere Financial is right here in Johnston, Iowa. One of the things that you heard prominently earlier this morning is that you got to have a commitment from the leadership of your organizations to help drive diversity and inclusion. And I'm here to tell you today that from a John Deere perspective, we have commitment both at the local and also at the global leadership level, with a focus on how do we do the things that we need to do to be extreme good partners and players in the diversity and inclusion space. One of the things we do as an enterprise, we aspire to have a diverse and inclusive workforce that matches the markets in which we do business. I think you heard that from other speakers this morning as well, and we certainly strive to do that, very much so. Additionally, we want our organization to be representative of the markets that we do business in throughout our entire talent pipeline. And I think we also heard earlier today that one of the things that you want to make sure happens is that your organization from top down looks like the communities in which you do business. And I think we can absolutely say that. We also want to create an environment where each of our employees feels that he or she can reach their ultimate potential. And so as a executive, I guess, with John Deere, I'm really pleased that we're a sponsor of this organization, and more specifically, a sponsor of this event. So now the fun part, Heather. She says, oh, great. So it's really neat when you have an opportunity to introduce people like Heather and Donna in our community. Remember, we talked about passion, action, and commitment. Certainly both of these fine people have PAC. So Heather is kind of interesting. You know, Heather didn't want me to say, she says, hey, you just get up there and you tell your story, because that's what she does. She's a storyteller. I says, no, I'm going to read your entire bio, word for word. But I think I won't do that because she does not want me to do that. But what I will tell you is, in looking up her profile, which wasn't included in the bio, I did learn that she was the chair of the LGBT organization at Principal as a volunteer. Again, think about the passion. But I think she also took action, and she says, by the way, we've got a position that is the Associate Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Principal, and I'm going to take my passion and I'm going to get a real job where I can make real change and I can push my ideas in diversity and inclusion forward. And so she now is the Associate Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Principal Financial Group, which is pretty impressive. So again, she's got passion. Now, I'm going to shift over to Donna Red Wing. How many of you guys have heard of her before? All right. That's pretty impressive. But what I want to tell you is she's not just a Des Moines, Iowa icon. She is a national icon in what she does. And so in reading through her bio, she had one thing tucked at the end of her bio that caught my interest. And she knows what that is. It's the Walter Cronkite Achievement Award for Freedom and Faith. That's pretty impressive. And so Wellmark's they talked about having a generation connection. And so there are some of us in here that know who Walter Cronkite is. There are probably some of you that do not. But what I'm going to tell you for people Donna's age, not mine, Walter, I'm sorry. Definitely my age as well. Walter Cronkite was the voice of America. He was a news reporter, and when I read that, it kind of transported me back in time to think about when I was a kid. Whenever he was on the evening news, one of the things that you were going to do if you were outside, at least in my household, you were going to come in and listen to the 6 o'clock news, and you're going to hear Walter Cronkite speak about America, and he was indeed the voice of America. So think about this. You have an award after someone who was a voice of America. That's pretty impressive. And not only did she get the award, she's actually the first recipient of the award. Now, to tell you just how prestigious this award is, some people think it's very attractive as an actor named George Clooney. Yes, that George Clooney has also received this award. And so think about that, the level of prominence this award means for what she does in her community and the work that she does for our country. And so I won't read her entire bio because I think my time's up. She said, stop, you've done too much. So please welcome Heather and Donna.
Well, good morning. So what Phil forgot to tell you is that I'm a disruptor, not a derailer, right? And so that's the conversation we're going to start today, if I can make this work. Perfect. We're going to talk a little bit about radical acts of civility. And I'm here with Principal Financial Group, a very, conservative, known as a conservative organization. So it's interesting that we throw up that we're being radical, but once in a while we can be. I'm going to give you the quick overview of what we're going to work on today and then tell you why this is an important topic for me and why I'm honored to stand up here with Donna. It's great being able to partner on these efforts and really learn from her experience in here. So we're going to do a little overview of civil dialogue, what it is. We're going to talk about an aha moment that Donna had and many of us have learned from. And then we're going to bring some panelists up to help us out with the conversation and actually share some real stories. Because at Principal, and I know outside of that too, others believe, as I do, that it's storytelling over numbers. I can give you numbers all day, great. You'll listen to them. We'll go back in our HR areas and we'll study them. But what really impacts you is when we capture your heart and your mind by sharing our stories. So we're very honored today to have Rosemary and Rich helping us out. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the hard conversation. How do you start it? Because you can't just go into a civil dialogue without being prepared. There has to be a level of trust that's entered into between the parties that are having this conversation. And we will open it up for Q&A and close it out. Oops. So with that, I'll give you a little overview of why Principal thinks this is important. So I'm gonna share a story. I didn't warn one of my table members that I was gonna share his story, but I want to talk a little bit about why this is so important. So this summer, we had some racial tension within this country, right? We had some shootings that were going on. And it's stressful to be an individual that's coming into a predominantly white workforce, right? Going through these emotions and hearing the comments. And I want to tell you the importance of trust. The trust that's established between those of us that are given the opportunity to drive a job from our passion, to our employees, to our senior management. That trust has to be part of who you are. It has to be part of your culture. So I'm honored that one of our employees that was thinking about this, was struggling through this day, had the courage to come up to me and say, Heather, this is tough. I want to talk about it. I want to talk about it at work. And so this framework that we're going to talk about today allowed us, because we had this in place, it allowed us to pull everybody together the following Monday. So this conversation took place on a Friday. You guys know how corporations are, right? We're really slow at getting things through, but we were able, because we had this foundation in place and the structure in place, to pull a conversation together on Monday and to have a real conversation. Now, we know we're not going to solve the world's problems, but we're going to make it better for individuals. You know, for somebody who's struggling today of what it's like to sit quietly as others share their opinions, right? And how they, as a diverse individual, I myself in that case too, you want to be careful about what you share so that you don't become that, quote, whatever it is. For me, it could be an angry lesbian. For this individual, it could be an angry black man, right? But these are true emotions that we're feeling, and if we want to get 100% of our performance out of employees, we've got to be willing to talk about things, and we've got to be open and let those emotions come into the workplace. So this is why this is important to us. Donna, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Sure. Well, I'm really glad you mentioned Walter Cronkite. For those of you who don't know, today would have been his 100th birthday.
Oh, happy
And
birthday.
I was honored to receive the Walter Cronkite Faith and Freedom Award. I was also honored to be with George Clooney when he did. And if you want that story, that's a 2-martini story at Splash, okay?
And rumor has it that somebody's retiring, so you could probably, find some time for that
Absolutely.
martini story. There we go.
But today I really do miss Walter Cronkite. I miss his objective and gracious honesty. We need to talk. And I should mention that I have allergies, and my voice is going to range from Brenda Vaccaro to Minnie Mouse. So that's where we are. So we need to talk. In March of this year, our President Obama spoke of the presidential campaigns, and he said, I know I'm not the only one in this room who may be more than a little dismayed about what's happening on the campaign trail today. We have heard vulgar and divisive rhetoric aimed at women and minorities and Americans who don't look like us or pray like us or vote like we do. And we all know in this room that that rhetoric now dominates the airways, dominates the campaigns. It feeds and fuels hate and normalizes incivility. This environment, wherever we are, red or blue, whoever we're voting for, this rhetoric affects every one of us. Whatever our point of view on the issues of the day, unless we have intentional and deliberative dialogue, we will fail. We'll fail to move forward. I believe that if we engage with respect and with civility in our politics, in our schools, our workplaces, our neighborhoods, our houses of worship, even in our families, if we engage with respect and civility, and if we focus on what it means to be a part of this larger community, our beloved community, I think we can honestly seek and find common ground. We will not always agree on the issues of the day: LGBTQ equality, reproductive health, immigration, refugee rights, foreign policy, race, religion, the economy. We will not agree. We can, however, acknowledge our differences. We can seek to understand those differences and seek to understand people who hold different points of view. I believe we can be our better selves, and we can engage with curiosity and respect, and most importantly, a willingness to listen. I am so tired of the hate. I think it's time we reach out. We reach out in the most uncomfortable places and to the most surprising people. It's time we find people where they are and that we actively engage in radical acts of civility. And that's why we are here today. We'd like to invite our panelists up. If you would please come up.
We are honored today to have Rosemary Parson and Dr. Rich Salas here joining us to share their stories, because again, we believe it's all about the story. It's all about the real interactions that we get to have and the value of your story. So I'm going to just turn it over. Rich, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I really liked, I think it was Phil that mentioned one of those acronyms, PAC, passion, action, and commitment. One of the things that's worked for me in trying to engage with someone that may have different views, different values, different perspectives on any given topic is this BAR method. If I may stand up. The B stands.
Sorry, guys.
I was going to say the B stands for bomb, but no. The B stands for breathe. Before, especially during this political season for me, I have to be able to sit back and take a deep breath. And then the A stands for acknowledge, to acknowledge that person's view and that perspective they're coming from. And the R stands for respond. Because when we do that, then we put active listening into place. And we're able to find that common ground that you're talking about. We tend to do RAB rather than BAR. We respond, we acknowledge, and then we breathe. I told that person off, and that's it. There's resistance, there's no communication there. So that's the first thing that I like to share with you, talking about acronyms here. I work at DMU, Des Moines University. I've been there for 5 years, originally from Texas, moved to Colorado, was at Colorado State for 20 plus years. Been doing diversity and inclusion work for a very long time. I enjoy it. I enjoy that we have such an incredible president and CEO, Dr. Franklin, that supports these diversity and inclusion measures, and not just supports them, but participates and engages and challenges our students, faculty, and staff to be a part of that process, to be part of that structure that needs to happen for us to have those desired outcomes. I'll stop there.
Good morning. I'm Rosemary Parson, and I'm the Senior Vice President at Equitrust Life Insurance Company, which is currently owned by Magic Johnson Enterprise. And I'd like to just acknowledge Farm Bureau. I don't know if anyone from Farm Bureau is here, but the reason I am in Iowa is because Farm Bureau in 2003 decided that they wanted to take a different approach to doing business, and they wanted to deploy a different marketing strategy. And during this marketing strategy, one of the key elements of it was to be able to bring in an innovative approach, innovative ideas, individuals that could think differently, could produce results as they were directed to do so. They had gone public, and the stock was pretty stagnant, and the shareholders had demanded a higher return on that share value. So they being Farm Bureau, had an option of utilizing a company it had on the shelf called Equitrust Life Insurance Company to deploy and do business differently. But to do so, they needed someone that knew something outside of their career marketing strategy, which we work in the independent marketing. We produce products wholesale. And so what they did was went on a national search to find someone who had a background that they believed would produce or help produce those results. I did a telephone interview. They had no idea who I was, but they were looking at an individual that they were interviewing, and in doing the research on the individual, they were sent to me. If that's really what you're trying to do, you need to go find this person. And this person being someone who had conducted mergers and acquisitions for about 11 years, had worked in the variable market, had also deployed outsourcing over in a third world country, and had been successful in doing divestitures. And that was the background they were brought, and we had an hour interview scheduled, we talked for 2. Long story short, I ended up moving to Des Moines, Iowa, West Des Moines, and Farm Bureau had the wherewithal to not be afraid. Obviously, I don't look like the executive in insurance, finance, but that didn't scare them. And they went ahead and moved forward with this company, which had no clients, no employees at the time, no business, and roll forward to 2016, Farm Bureau sold the company to Guggenheim, the big Guggenheim, who then sold the company to Magic Johnson. We're now still in West Des Moines. We have about 130 employed individuals. We have over 200,000 clients, 25,000 agents, and my team manages over $17 billion in assets under management.
So Rosemary, no, thank you. Rosemary, I'll jump in. I do think you do look like the executive of our future. So, you know,
Yes.
I really
you.
appreciate you sharing your story today. Where do you want to go? Sure. So we gave you guys some questions in advance to kind of think about. And I can go through and read these if you want me to help you get started. Okay. Have you ever struggled to connect with someone who has opposite views from your own? Someone with whom you disagree on a profound and important issue. So tell us a little bit about those situations and about maybe why we engaged you in this conversation today.
I just took a deep breath.
Yeah?
I like to stand up for this. Yeah, I absolutely have had several discussions.
Don't worry, I got it. I've got you.
And hopefully they fall into civil dialogue, and I think they do because I practice that bar method. But I think that's, for me, is when I really learn about that personal reflection that one of the gentlemen was talking about, and self-awareness about my own biases and my own assumptions and preconceived notions, and why it's important for me to continue to grow as personal and professionally. But I had a situation that I'd like to share with you this morning. It was probably I'm on my 5th year at Des Moines University. I love it. But it was my 3rd month on the job that someone came into my office. And this individual said, Dr. Salas, I think you're doing a great job. But you know that safe zone stuff? Don't you think that you're going overboard? and I said, well, took another breath, right? Come on in, have a seat. You can call me Rich. Have a seat. Tell me more about that. And so he went on to tell me that he treated everyone the same. And as healthcare providers, as physicians, that it was important that we understand that everyone bleeds red and kind of the colorblind perspective. And so another deep breath. And then he said, you know, all that diversity stuff during the lunch hour, the music, all the tip of the iceberg stuff, that's great. But you should try to really consider scaling down these safe zone trainings. You're all familiar with safe zone trainings.
They're not.
You're not?
They're not all familiar.
Okay. Well, safe zone training is a training that we host for students, faculty, and staff to really promote and foster a safe environment for everyone. The specific focus is on addressing issues, challenges that the LGBT community faces. And in this respect, in this environment at DMU, related to healthcare. So we think it's important to be able to deliver culturally responsive care in the 21st century. You have to be able to understand your patients, not only race and ethnicity, but certainly sexual orientation, gender expression, and all the variations of identity. At any rate, he came in and he started telling me that, he treated everyone the same and so on and so forth. I listened to him for about 5 minutes, and then when he was done, I acknowledged him. And I said, this is what I'm hearing you say, and I want you to know that the safe zone trainings are not mandatory, so you don't have to go if you don't want to. You can come some other time. When you're ready, I'll meet you there, okay? And he goes, well, it's not just me, Dr. Salas, it's a couple of other people here on campus that are very conservative, and we're just having a hard time. You've only been here for 3 months. You've offered 2 safe zone trainings, and I think you have 2 more scheduled. I said, no, I have 3 more scheduled. And he goes, well, this ABC stuff. I told him, no, it's not ABC, it's LGBT. It's important, and for the reasons that I mentioned, looked at the literature, at the census, so on and so forth. He left, not too happy. I'd see him around in the halls. Every now and then, I try to make it intentional to kind of bump into him and say hello, but look the other way. Every now and then, I get a hello. Fast forward 3 years. This person's on his way out to retire. Good individual, awesome individual, but didn't understand what we were trying to do in terms of relevancy and safe zone trainings. He came into my office and he goes, Dr. Salas, I went to a safe zone training today, and it wasn't that bad. And I said, well, great, have a seat, let's talk. What'd you learn? What do you think? What do we need to improve? He goes, well, the terminology was really good. And I really liked the panel. In fact, Donna was on that panel. Donna's all over the place. Just a powerful story, sharing her story and the relevance and so on and so forth. And I go, that's great. That is awesome. And he goes, I know you're busy, but can I have a hug? And I go, whoa, okay, what's going on here? Where's this going? And I said, sure. I got up and approached this individual, gave him a hug. And he goes, Dr. Salas, thank you. My son came out 3 weeks ago. His son was 28 years old. This particular person was closing in on his 70s, retirement. My point in sharing this story with you is not to say, oh, wow, look at what DMU is doing, or Dr. Salas. To have civil discourse, to have civil dialogue, sometimes requires time and patience and humility to reap the dividends and reap the benefits of it. It was 3 years later, and we both cried together. I had tears in my eyes, and so did he. And I still have contact with this individual. So the message, at that first engagement of difference, yes, I've had many of those, especially, like I said earlier, during a political season. Don't think it's going to happen overnight. It might take 3 years like this individual, but it's well worth it. Thank you.
It's a great story, Dr. Salas. I'll go back a little bit because I think that there's many different ways to approach learning and understanding. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana, and this is the first time I've told this story. So in Iowa, in Indianapolis, of course, they knew, but I was part of a lawsuit when I went to high school. And I'll read it so I say it properly. The federal court of the United States sued the Board of Commissioners of Indianapolis, Indiana, and they won. And as a result, it was reverse busing, just to get down to the bottom line. So to give you an idea of what that's like, there are no 100% majority or minority black schools here, but for kicks and giggles, let's say there was. It would be the same as taking the freshmen out of Valley and busing them downtown to East High School, and it being a mandate, not an option. And what happened as a result was that the news media, the police, and the faculty were all out front every day. So if you can imagine, as a 14-year-old, you're walking to school, There's lights everywhere, there's police, there's uniforms, there's media, cameras flashing, and you're not quite sure why. Well, we went ahead and went to school, went to the classrooms, and of course the parents attended the classrooms with the kids. And they would sit in the back, and we would go in the classroom. When the bell rung, everyone would leave. And the parents would follow their children, the white parents would follow their children into the next class. This went on for about 3 weeks. Well, what the parents didn't know is that their problems weren't our problems, their beliefs weren't our beliefs, and their thoughts weren't our thoughts. So what we did as kids is we would go to the cafeteria, and we just decided that we would just hang out after school and figure out each other. So what we did was we had conversations very civilly, and we exposed all of the teachings that occurred behind the closed doors of our various ethnicities. And we asked each other questions about why and how and what if and what does that mean. And we actually challenged each other and said, I don't believe that. That's ridiculous. That's stupid. Why would you believe that? This is the kind of conversations that we had. And then we said, do you really believe that? Well, let me think about it. And I won't use examples, that's irrelevant. But we really challenged each other about the stereotypical beliefs we were taught and about the assumptions that were made in our households, in our families. And what was interesting about the lawsuit is before they came to a final conclusion of the forced busing, there had been many examples of this in the southern states, and it didn't go so well. It ended up in riots, and it ended up in a lot of other types of discourses for the communities. And so that was one of the evidence that was put into the lawsuit. And so what the federal court decided to do, it said, hey, here's what we're going to do. Let's research the culture of Indianapolis, Indiana. Do we have the propensity to have this same type of thing happen here? And what they found out when they looked into the history of Indianapolis is that Indianapolis, like Virginia, Indiana, was one of the states where free blacks came across the seas with the whites to help discover the country. It was one of the states where there were already blacks living in the various communities. They were called colored communities on their own free will. And it was a place where they had helped to discover the capital of Indianapolis. And yes, you're right. There was a lot of segregation in the city, and there was a lot of other things that happened many times after that that we are all aware of. So they said, well, no, we don't believe there's the propensity in the city for those same things to happen. We're going to move forward with it. Now back to our conversations. We went back, and as kids, we said, after about 3 weeks of all this nonsense, we said, we're tired of it. What are we going to do? So we said, okay, here's what we're going to do. Monday comes, we're not going into class. We're going to stand in a home. Parents want to be taught. They can be taught by the facilitators. The media wants to take pictures. They can take pictures of the parents. We're not going in the classroom. So we stood in the hall very quietly, and the bell rang. Teachers came out, and they said, you've got to go in. We said, we're not going in. Why aren't you going in? Parents are in there. Why aren't you, what, they're not your parents. Well, their police are out there, and the media's out there. Get rid of them. And like, well, we can't get rid of them. So we all stood together. These are of us who have had these conversations about the stereotypes and the biases that we all had and were revealing to each other. And we stood there, and they finally agreed. So the parents left, and they said, okay, the parents are gone. They're out of the classroom. He's like, nope, media's still here. Okay, so the media left. And they said, okay, well, faculty is still here. Faculty went back to work. Okay, we went back to school. And from that day forward, we come up with a different method of addressing our differences. And did we have fights? Yes, we had fights because Susie took Jack's boyfriend or girlfriend. Yes, we had fights because she did not receive the National Honor Society award she thought she would receive because now we have white kids in the school and they're taking our place. Yes, but we also had a method of resolution. And to this day, I think that method of resolution, which I share with all my team in all of the companies that I have been in. I was at a previously Fortune 500 company before coming here. And we have the same kind of conversations, and we have the same kind of culture here in Des Moines, Iowa. So I do believe firmly that there are other methods of handling situations and really understanding what's at the root cause and what's at the root culture and what's at the root belief system before we make action and make decisions.
So how do we have these conversations? I think after Bob and I started our conversations, people started calling me, and they actually started calling him. And people would say, well, there's this person who despises me, but I think I should meet with them. And I'd say, yeah, well, you have to do a little work first. You have to be ready. I should admit, when I invited Bob Vanderplatz for coffee, I never thought that he would say yes. Never thought that he would say yes. So I think the first thing is to set a stage for that conversation. For us and for others that I've had, it has always been in a public place. A quiet conversation, a personal conversation, but in a public place. So we have met at places like Smoky Row, coffee shops. When people recognize us, they lean toward us to hear what we're saying. And if we laugh, people are horrified. But other than that, the public space is a good one. And I think certainly in the workplace, that would be appropriate.
Yep. And I think there's going to be some big differences between a personal civil dialogue and a workplace civil dialogue. Workplace civil dialogue is really about education and forcing ourselves to stop and listen. So we'll have some parameters here that we set up, but Donna, I'll let you go on before you want me to hop in?
One of the key things I like to say that's worked at Des Moines University is creating those spaces, although they may be just 10 or 12 people, to be able to have these conversations and this dialogue. But before that is really establishing some guiding principles to making sure that people have the ability to pass when they feel uncomfortable. I mean, feeling uncomfortable is good, I think, for us to self-reflect, but you have to meet people where they're at. And one of the things I really liked about what Rana said earlier is no blaming or shaming in the process, because that right away creates resistance and shutting people down.
Yeah. So one of the first things that we start with, that it's be hard on the topic and soft on the people, right? And you want to make sure that you're not making anyone feel uncomfortable, because different points of view doesn't mean someone is wrong. And so we have a few different things that we've provided, including a draft. So do not take this as this is the only document you have, but this is a draft of the civility agreement that can be used. You should have copies at your table. If you didn't get one, let Donna know, and we'll get you copies.
Sure. And I think it's really important that you have to transform your thinking around these conversations. What's your purpose? You know, if it's just because you're curious, that's probably not a good enough reason. What do you want to accomplish? When I first met with Bob, I did not think that I would move him 180 degrees and he would march with me in the Gay Pride Parade next year. I knew that that was not going to happen. But I also knew that we needed to begin to have conversations because we live in this community. I think you have to be prepared to have some buttons pushed. In these conversations, for me, either with Bob or with other people, things are said that are painful and they're hurtful. Are you ready to hear them? If you're not, you are not ready to have those conversations. I think you have to ask, do you think some good will come out of this? If you don't have an answer to that, then maybe you shouldn't have the conversation. And I think the most important thing for me was to understand that I could only control myself, my actions, and my responses in this exchange. So you really need to prepare yourself.
So in the work environment, to hold these conversations, we worked on setting up a contract. So this is a verbal contract. We don't use the civility agreement per se on this document, but what we do is we set the stage when we start any conversation. So if you're looking to do this within a corporate setting, I would challenge you to explore your values consider if the trust is in the room. Because the trust has to be there that we assume good intent, right? So we assume that everything that comes out of someone's mouth is coming from a place of goodness, a place of maybe just not having the right exposure, the same point of view as we do, maybe that have been having these conversations a little longer. It doesn't mean that we're not going to help them along. So we understand mistakes will happen. We need to help fix that. We need to forgive that, and then we need to move it forward. Because the only way that you're really going to move something forward is to have a conversation. If I scream at someone, if I tell them that they're wrong, if I prove that they're wrong, because I prove it in my mind, and they aren't listening to me, I didn't create any value out of that conversation, and that work relationship is probably going to stink from that point forward, right? That's not what we want to foster. We want to foster open dialogue where we're learning from each other. And we also need to have safe spaces that you talked about. We call them judgment-free zones. So zones where we can come in and say, look, I know we're in Iowa. A lot of times with our conversations, we're in Iowa. You've maybe not been exposed to different points of view. You've maybe not had the experience of working in a diverse environment all the time, right? So there are going to be some things that you've heard that you need to just clear up. So clear them up in here. This is the right time. And then understand, this is one of the tenets when I took this role a year and a half ago that I promised my leaders that we would do. We would get people comfortable in the uncomfortable. And I talked to our leaders at Principal about this, that it's my job in this room, right, to get everybody uncomfortable so that when you're back at your desk and in the real world, not in a training environment, when a situation comes up, you're comfortable in it. It doesn't mean that that situation isn't uncomfortable, but you're comfortable enough in your abilities and in the conversations that you've had so that you can be prepared. And that preparation might be just to say, I don't have the right answer, but I think I know who we can talk to, right? Or I know maybe I need to learn a little more, so help me understand your perspective. That's why we get people comfortable in an uncomfortable environment.
One of the things I'd like to add, if I may, let's not mistake, assuming good intent does not dismiss impact.
Sure.
Because, of course, someone may say, well, I didn't intend to offend you, especially nowadays with a lot of different microaggressions going on, and specifically, I want to be clear, not sugarcoat it, against people of color. Where are you from? What language? And I know people have good intentions. I guess my point is there's an appropriate time to maybe pull that person aside and say, I just want to talk to you about this. I know you didn't intend anything bad, but can we talk about how we can reframe that and use the proper language that's inclusive? I think that's important for us to do, and we can do that on an individual basis. So not dismissing the importance of impact. The intent, yes. But if I step on your foot and say, oops, I'm sorry, my intent wasn't to step on your foot. It's still going to hurt.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Rosemary.
And I just wanted to say, I think it's really important, we've all heard before, but it's critical that we listen to learn as opposed to listening to respond.
So if we're assuming a good intent, I try to find common ground. And sometimes that is very, very difficult. But you can find it. For Bob and I, it's around the trafficking of children in Iowa. We agree that this is a horrible issue, a horrible problem, and that no matter where we are, conservative or progressive, evangelical or not, wherever we are, this is an issue we need to deal with. We've had conversations around immigration, around refugees, around things that are not LGBTQ. I think mistakes will happen. They happen every time I have one of these civil conversations. A judgment-free zone. I'm no Pollyanna. I do not walk around, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya. When I say that I'm an activist and an advocate, I'm usually an agitator. That's who I am. However, in these conversations, when I feel that reptilian brain start to come to the front, right? When my stereotypes start to kick in, when I start to make judgments about somebody, I need to push that back. And then getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. I just need to share this. I think we know that some of our needs, we need to understand that some of our needs will be met in these conversations, and some of our fears are going to be realized. About a year ago, I was doing a training for a group of law enforcement officers, and it was a mixed group, And, you know, to be quite honest, walk into a room with mostly men with guns who don't want to be there. That's a really interesting place to be. And afterward, this man came up to me, and he was a sheriff. He must have been 6'4". He walked up to me, and as I went to shake his hand, he came so close to me that I couldn't. And I thought one of my fears was going to be realized. And he said, "So are you that woman that has conversations with Bob?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." And he gave me this great big bear hug and said, "Thank you." Sometimes our fears will be realized. Last year at this event, after conversation about being uncomfortable and reaching out and connecting with someone, I did that in this room. And 3 times I asked that person to meet with me for coffee, and that person refused because she will not meet with a lesbian activist. So let's not pretend that it's easy. Let's not pretend that because we got together for 3 or 4 hours this morning that, we're all going to have these delightful civil conversations. Let's realize that this is hard stuff. What I have to understand is that just because I'm willing to put my hand out to someone, I have no idea who they really are, what's their experience, what's their fear, and what's their pain. So, civil dialogue, I think, is the hardest work I've ever done. When things are black, white, blue, or red, Laurel or Hardy, however you want to divide it, that's easy, easy stuff. When we get into the complexity of who we are in this great community, when we have to seek not only their humanity, but tap into our own, that's the hard, hard work. The last one. So we have some things, but these are great. Yeah, this is great. Do the last one. This is my favorite. Oh, Civility Cafe, if you're interested, there's stuff on your table. But this is my favorite. If you have nothing to say, say nothing. Mark Twain.
All right. With that, we will open up for questions for a few minutes. No time for questions. So if you have questions, email us or catch us on the way out. Apologize.